Good afternoon, morning, and evening, and thank you for joining us for a special webinar to celebrate Harmony Week. My name is Maida Rashid, and I'm the Manager Capability Development and Engagement at the Australian Institute for Disaster Resilience, and I'm so delighted to be your host for the session. I wish to start by acknowledging that the AIDR team is hosting this event from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all join us from today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. I pay my respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that thousands of years that Indigenous people have cared for the land. I'm joining you today from Tarwa, a small village in Bangladesh. Growing up, floods and cyclones were simply part of my life. Those experiences continue to shape how I think about disaster resilience and the strength of community. This is a country where community, culture, and collective care play a vital role in how people prepare for and recover from disasters. I will introduce our speakers shortly, but before that, I would like to provide you with some brief housekeeping notes. Today's event will be recorded and made available along with presentation slides after the event. Make sure to subscribe to updates from AIDR to receive the link to the recording. Today, we will be using the Q&A features on Zoom to take questions. So please post your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat window. You will be able to upvote questions by clicking the thumbs up button, and my colleague Melissa Pepin will ask a number of these questions to our speakers following the presentations. Please use the chat window to share any thoughts or reflections during the presentations. And just a reminder that you will need to select everyone in the drop-down menu so that everyone can view your messages. I would also like to remind, let's be respectful to each other and to our presenters when posting your comments or questions. Just a quick heads up, some of the topics that we are going to discuss today might feel a bit heavy or bring up past experience. If that happens, please take a moment to use any strategies or techniques that work best for you to stay comfortable. Today, we are diving into a really important topic, multicultural perspectives on disaster resilience. Harmony Week is a time to recognise and celebrate Australia's cultural diversity and to reflect on inclusion, respect, and a sense of belonging for everyone. When it comes to disasters, this reminds us that resilience is not one size fits all. It looks different across communities, and it needs to be shaped with people grounded in cultural knowledge, lived experiences, and local leadership. Today, our speakers will share insights from both research and practice, showing why working with multicultural communities, not just for them, why it is so important in building stronger, more inclusive community resilience. All right, that's enough from me. Let's jump in. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker for today, Scott Hanson-Easey. He's a senior lecturer and social psychologist in the School of Public Health at Adelaide University. His research examines how diverse communities understand and respond to health risks. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Maida, and thank you again for the invitation to talk at this webinar today, and also to John Richardson for the invite. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I'm coming to you from Ghana land, in Adelaide, so I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present, and also recognise that the land I'm sitting on today was never ceded by the Kaurna people. So next slide, please. So just to situate and contextualise my talk, I had a look on Harmony Week just to remind myself what it was really about. And so to my mind, kind of the ideas of inclusivity, respect and belonging are really key, and really key to equitable access to risk information and disaster information, which I'll be talking about through this talk. Next slide, please. So you will probably know a lot about this, but culturally and linguistically diverse communities in Australia experience heightened vulnerability during natural disasters and emergency events. And this is why I'm giving this talk today, and this is the reason for my research generally. So I put the kind of vulnerability in kind of scare quotes there, because vulnerability in this context is not really about the community themselves. Vulnerability is putting the scare marks there to problematize the idea of vulnerability that comes from communities. So I just want to draw attention to the fact that the source of this vulnerability is not with communities themselves, but it's produced and reproduced by structural and systemic inequalities. And the kind of key contributing factors are named there. So some communities will experience one or two of those factors, some will experience more. But the underpinning kind of site of those vulnerabilities is with society, not with communities. So in risk communication, this kind of inequality is pretty much underpinned by traditional and the most prevalent model of communication. Next slide, please. Which is the kind of sender message channel or receiver kind of model of communication. It's very top-down. It's premised on the information deficit model as well, where communication kind of fills voids or gaps in receiving audiences' knowledge bases. So there's some serious equity issues implicit in how we communicate about risk using this model, chiefly because this communication model is grounded in a very top-down way. It doesn't really recognise that there are different types of information that needs to be communicated to different types of audiences and communities. It has limited engagement with communities themselves around the design of messages, and it kind of risks kind of developing mistrustful misunderstandings and kind of disengagement from messages around risk and disaster. So this kind of classic model of communication assumes that messages are transmitted kind of like Morse code, and the meaning is transmitted from sender to receiver in a kind of linear kind of way. Is basically very, very flawed, and especially creates a lot of problems for cold communities. And we don't have to think back too far to remember how that played out in the context of COVID. And how there are very inequitable outcomes for minority and cold and newly arrived groups in Australia. Next slide, please. So to overcome some of the problems with this traditional way of communicating, my work has used a methodology called participatory action research, and it's quite common in public health and in the social sciences more generally. So PAR kind of enables researchers to work in partnership with communities in a manner that kind of leads to action. And so in my work, the kind of co-design of communication resources has used this model of engagement. It's very much framed by a deep community engagement, which I'll talk about briefly now. Next slide, please. So this is the old kind of Einstein ladder of citizen participation. Often communication around risks and disasters and crises are kind of use the consultation kind of levels of engagement with communities, but participatory action research uses kind of partnership or shared decision-making point on the ladder, where communities are very much more engaged and co-design messages. So the problem, I guess, the problem with kind of the lower kind of levels of engagement is that the power to make decisions is very much still remains with the institutions. Communities are consulted but not meaningfully kind of heard. With the higher kind of levels that PAR uses, it is community knowledge and power and engagement with the actual process of co-designing messages is much higher. And there's a lot more power being given over to communities at the higher levels. Next slide, please. So generally, this is the kind of underpinning kind of idea behind PAR with co-designing messages around risk. So the actual messages are produced by using this kind of basic theory of congruence, where two bodies of knowledge from communities, but knowledge from the communicating agency come together in a message or a design of a message that is congruent. So it's the ultimate kind of goal for PAR in message design and construction. Next slide, please. So just a couple of basic kind of insights that I've gleaned over the years working with different communities and different communicating agencies such as the CFA, the SES, and SA Police. It's a simplification, but I think these kind of principles here are kind of fundamental to the work around PAR with co-designing messages. So very much kind of the respectful and general engagement positions communities here as the experts. Communities have unique knowledge that can only be shared with you had the kind of deep engagement, which I talked about on the previous slide. So this kind of engagement takes a long time to develop. It's often kind of contingent upon working with an agency that actually has an ongoing relationship, historical relationship with the community. And it works only when you can develop that trust and that kind of engagement with the community that you're hoping to communicate to. Very much communities define what dimension of the risk they want to focus on in context. So not all dimensions of a risk or a hazard can be addressed by a particular message, and it's really important to kind of demarcate around what's most important. And communities are often have great ideas about what is most important and most present salient for them in terms of a hazard or a disaster information. So risk is understood kind of within its kind of local, social and contextual context rather than a purely technical problem. So participatory processes allow for kind of social, economic, cultural and structural factors to shape how risks are interpreted and responded to. It's kind of impossible to know these things unless you engage with communities over time. It's only through talking with communities that this is possible. So engaging with the lived experience of communities as well is kind of fundamental. And in particular, the degree to which the communities kind of trust the communicating agencies is very important, and very important when you're trying to co-design messages. So in some cases, the risk message is as much about developing understanding and trusting the communicating agency than it is about actually communicating ideas about mitigating risk. So how risk information is best communicated, and with the videos that I have links to in the end of this presentation, you'll see that the cultural overlays that are used to communicate messages. So in these videos, communities risk messages are conveyed by their own community in language. And it kind of positions, such as the CFA video, kind of positions particular organisations like the CFA as kind of there to protect communities, not to police communities. So this is, again, working to build trust and to kind of redesign or formulate some of the problematic identities around some emergency services that called and newly arrived refugee communities have. So it's working to build trust and reframe the organisations as helping and not policing. So meaningful engagement, next slide, please. So meaningful engagement, really can't be done overnight. So PAR really must be invested in over the long term, especially in the context of a crisis. It's particularly important because communities experience structural inequalities, racism, and institutional mistrust, which will kind of impact invitations to participate on projects around the co-design of messages. So for some cold communities, engagement and government or institutional actors may be associated with surveillance or exclusion, or past experiences of being ignored and misrepresented. So it's a big barrier, but it's a really important barrier to overcome. So PAR in this context takes a lot of time. It can take a lot of money sometimes, and it will confront kind of broader societal, historic, and systematic and structural barriers. So as a result, researchers and agencies may encounter some understandable kind of scepticism or pushback, or limited trust or reluctance to participate. It also confronts kind of sometimes in some agencies, I guess the command and control idea is still quite salient, and it kind of confronts institutional humility and about kind of the sharing of power. So for some, this will be kind of quite difficult to work through in some agencies. But overall, these are not reasons to discount PAR inspired processes, because the status quo in risk communication is inequitable, often disrespectful and alienating. And it thus maintains it's not really a neutral choice, it's a failure of practice to accept the status quo. So choosing not to change existing approaches means reproducing the same inequalities in who is heard, who is reached, and who is protected. In disaster and risk contexts, these are not abstract ideas, but they shape real-world preparedness, response, and outcomes. So thank you for your time and for your attention. My details are on the next in 2 slides, and there's some details on the films as well on the next slide that you're very welcome to have a look at. Thanks, Mahida. I didn't go over time.
No, you didn't, Scott, just in time. Thank you, Scott, for fantastic presentation. We heard how we can turn vulnerability into strength by creating trust and empowering participations for culturally diverse communities. Now, I would like to welcome our next speakers, Farah Farouque, CEO at the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. Farah brings substantial experience in social policy, strategic communications with her senior leadership experience in the community sector. Over to you, Farah.
Thanks very much, Maida. Good morning, or good afternoon, rather, from Wurundjeri country. I'm here in Coburg in Multicultural Victoria, which is very appropriate for the discussion today. So I'm CEO at the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria, which is a 50-plus year organisation, for about 16 months. And actually, I had the pleasure of working with Maida, who was working in advising us around multicultural emergency management before she was poached away. And one of the first things she told me as a fellow South Asian was really interesting. She said that, we have a large number of South Asian migrants here in Australia, and Maida hails from Bangladesh. I'm from Sri Lanka, and originally. And so she told me the story of when a lot of people from South Asia come without experience of local climate conditions on a very hot day, and we all know how incredibly, oppressive an Australian summer can be. The instinct is, having come from a tropical country, to open the windows and doors to let the breeze in. But in fact, that is quite the contrary response. What you should do is close your windows, doors, and pull down your blinds. So that's a really simple example of how, different environmental and cultural contexts can bring responses. And that's at the heart of our approach to emergency management response and communications. And I Scott's insights are really valuable we're an organisation that's actually putting this kind of thinking into practice. It's not about creating top-down resources for multicultural communities. It's about working with multicultural communities to understand what they understand, and then working with them alongside them, and be actually told by them about what the appropriate response is, and shaping things together in order to get a good outcome. ECCV, which is my organisation's acronym, undertakes a range of projects to support migrant and refugee communities across Victoria and preparing for, responding to and recovering from emergencies. And we have on our radar the issue of climate change, of course. In 2024-25, we completed our Multicultural Emergency Management Initiative, which was funded by Emergency Recovery Victoria, an agency of the Victorian government. So a shout out there for their support. And this program was to ensure that multicultural communities across our state had access to culturally appropriate in-language support before, during, and after emergency. A key focus of our emergency management work has been strengthening collaboration between multicultural communities and emergency services. There's still work to do there. Regional multicultural emergency management working groups were established across Victoria as place-based hubs for culturally tailored preparedness materials to be developed. These groups co-designed and disseminated locally relevant in-language resources that reflect both the cultural context and regional hazard priorities, such as bushfires, floods, heat waves, and water safety, because actually local really matters alongside cultural appropriateness in responding to this. And the focus of this particular project was regional. Trusted community leaders and the absolutely essential bicultural workers were mobilised as vital conduits for sustained engagement. And trust is such a key to this work, because we all know there's been an erosion of trust through many platforms, and we've got a lot of misinformation online, etc. So trust is key. And I want to share with you a practical example of collaboration for community resilience that happened at the end of January 2025 because of these relationships. So it's not just about the creation of resources or having a portfolio of materials, or indeed, with respect, Scott, and I'm sure you'll agree, theories and behind our work. It's those relationships that are key. And so ECCV was alerted via our regional networks that the Karen Burmese community in Nell was facing threats from ongoing bushfires. And so what we did was we were sort of a facilitator. We hit the ground running, we like to think, and I think we did that, by reaching out to our regional partner, the Ballarat Regional Multicultural Council, which knows this region very well, to find practical ways to support the community. And one of the things that we ascertained through our work with our regional partner was that while local multicultural organisations and councils were doing their best to help, there was a major gap in direct face-to-face communication with the Karen community. Many community members relied on verbal communications and found it difficult to follow written updates, or indeed, and they're very valuable. I don't want to talk about online resources, but for some communities that didn't work, and this was this particular context. On top of that, having too many sources of information also created confusion, making it even more important to ensure clear, consistent messaging from, again, I emphasize, a trusted source. And so our role was as this sort of, facilitating agency. We allocated funds and worked with the local people on the ground to facilitate a face-to-face community session. And this session was run in partnership with the Burmese community leaders on the ground. And also we had participating the Country Fire Authority here in Victoria, local council, and emergency services, and focused on improving understanding of fire safety and emergency procedure. So I think that's a really good example of many tiers working together. It can never be top down. We really have to lean on the ground up. I think that's one of our key learnings from the work we've been conducting for some years. And it's work we hope to, currently that project has finished, but it's work we hope to return to. So in terms of the delivery of this project, ECCV was the lead organisation, and we worked with local partners and led the Multicultural Emergency Management Initiative, delivering a cohesive program across multiple levels of engagement. And our partners were our multicultural regional networks, and they are critical because they know their local communities, as well as all the key agencies as well. And fundamental to that was the core design process, talking to the issue that Scott talked about. And that included, forming a regular meetings, and then having several in-person sessions where we gained valuable information, because multicultural people are experts in what's best for multicultural people. And so you do need that critical partnership input. I note in Scott's notes, he talked about the citizenship piece. I think probably that's still an evolutionary aspect of this work, but I think with involvement by organisations like ECCV, we can move towards that model. But I would concede we're probably not there yet. We still have that more partnership approach. So we've prepared a really great resource, Let's Prepare and Be Safe Resources Hub, where we collaborated with a wide range of organisations and leaders, including O Victoria, Ambulance Victoria, SES Victoria, Life Saving Victoria, local councils, notably Hume City Council and Marybeck City Council, regional and statewide leaders, including young people, women, community educators, etc., to come up with materials. And we were there from Albury, Wodonga to Sunraysia, Mallee, across the state, and with key organisations' involvement. And this can never be one organisation. We're a peak body, but we're a coordinating body, and that's how we see our role in the preparation of these resources. And so, I mean, one of our key messages is that the solution isn't just to translate more information. It's about changing how emergency systems work so they include multicultural communities from the very start. And I think that's echoed through Scott's presentation as well. But that's one of our key learnings. So we really, gained some valuable insights about effective and inclusive creation of resources. And, some of the key ways to build lasting resilience is to recognise that newly arrived migrants face unique preparedness barriers, and international students, skilled migrants, refugees, temporary visa holders often lack local hazard knowledge and connection to services, or awareness even of where to find accurate and timely information. Many had never heard of Victoria's emergency warning systems. So, one of the other key messages I want to share is that preparedness, and I think I've reinforced this as I've been speaking, preparedness must remain community-based and trust-based. That trust piece is critical. Communities responded most positively when activities were led by local multicultural organisations and trusted by cultural workers. Also, one-size-fits-all messaging does not work. Community feedback consistently showed that materials must be tailored not only in language, but format, tone, cultural relevance, and locally specific. We're excited to say that we've got some really quite unique resources using sort of animation type approaches, etc., which we've launched. We've soft launched, but we're going to we don't want to rush them to market either. We're doing some further testing to make sure that they are, correctly placed on our website. But the key is that they can't just reside on one website. We're looking to share those resources under, Creative Commons. So it's not about owning those resources. We've created those resources and then we own them. We need to disseminate them widely, and we don't need to have our badge on them. I think that's another key thing. I think organizations can be very possessive at times about ownership of resources. But if you're really trying to reach communities, you've got to, like a balloon, release them into the air. I'm not sure whether a balloon is the appropriate metaphor because it's not environmentally good, but even so. Look, I think I'm coming up to my time. Maida, is that so? Oh, she's
Thanks, Farah, just in time.
Okay. I've got more insights to share, but look, I hope that's given you a little bit of a sense of where we're at. Please come to our website. Please come to our website, and I'll share further with Maida and team about what we're doing in this space. Let me say, as a finality, it's a work in progress. We're still in the, despite the fact that we're in this space, it's very much an emerging space because I don't think there's sufficient acknowledgement of the demographics of our multicultural populations and the sheer diversity of it all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Farah, for brilliant presentations. And please, if you have any questions for Farah, put them in the Q&A. I would like to welcome our next speakers, Mary Hajistassi and Summer Ibrahim from Australian Red Cross. Mary is currently the State Manager of Programs at the Australian Red Cross, and Summer brings strong experience supporting multicultural and linguistically diverse communities in health education and disaster resilience. Over to you, Mary and Summer.
Thanks so much, Maida. I'd like to start firstly by acknowledging that I have a Cypriot Greek background, so I would say Kalispera to everybody, which means good afternoon. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Kaurna people here in South Australia, so the people of the Adelaide Plains. Summer and I are here to talk to you a little bit about, and it's a beautiful segue in terms of the theoretical framework that Scott talked about the example that Farah talked about. We are really going to dig in and talk about a project, or two projects actually, that we have run here in South Australia that really picks up on all of the work that Scott and Farah were talking about. It is about working alongside people from multicultural backgrounds and working together to seek outcomes in terms of strengthening disaster resilience. I would like to say that our program is deeply rooted and based on the following documents. So obviously the National Disaster Risk Reduction Framework. In South Australia, we also have a People at Risk and Emergencies Framework. That has now been updated, but this was the document that was in play when we started the project, as well as our State Disaster Resilience Strategy, where the focus area that strongly roots our work in neighbourhoods and communities. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And so when we think about the foundation or the framework and the methodology that we use, it really is rooted in these core principles. So no surprise, it is around shared responsibility, about collaboration. And for our work, it really was rooted in a place-based approach. It is about, and if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about our Ready Communities methodology. So Ready Communities is a Red Cross program. It is about place-based work, bringing whole of community together. And these are the steps that we take throughout the program. So firstly, we engage with community. Now, Red Cross is very fortunate in the fact that we are a global brand, and quite often the communities that we work with know about us and have trust in us, not based on their relationship here in Australia, but potentially from their relationships that they hold with Red Cross, Red Crescent in other parts of the world. So we are on the front foot in terms of that recognition of our brand. But in terms of when we talk about engaging, really want to make the point that people from multicultural backgrounds are not hidden. They're part of our everyday communities. It's just around how we engage with them. So Summer, who is on the line, who actually led one of the projects, she would be seen approaching community leaders through established networks, through, pounding the pavement, going into supermarkets or businesses that are owned and run by people from multicultural communities. She would attend events where people gathered. So engaging really was around looking at the demographic of the people that live in that place, finding them, having conversations with them, and asking them about their experience and whether they would like to engage in this process. From there, we move to really assessing the capacities and vulnerabilities and risks that are attached to a particular place. And then we run a series of workshops with those community leaders to plan and design and effectively implement a disaster resilience plan that is community-led and owned. We talk about mobilisation. It's very, very obvious that there are no better people to mobilise community members than community members themselves. So despite the fact that we are working predominantly with both formal and informal community leaders, there is a clear ask up front that the work that we do together is thinking about how they are going to engage with their communities to either plan together or to pass information back and forth. And then finally, we have a connection part of our methodology, which then links anyone that's been involved in Ready Communities into a broader network where they can share experiences, templates, work that they have done. And to date in South Australia, we have worked in close to 50 communities. However, this project really is talking about, we piloted this methodology in 2 areas, and with a strong focus on CALD communities, multicultural communities. So if we go to the next slide. So we've talked about before I go into this slide, I would also just like to mention, considering I was just talking about frameworks, that Red Cross and the Federation of Ethnic Community Councils of Australia are at the very beginning stages of developing a national framework and toolkit for multicultural inclusion and emergencies. So my details and Summer's details are at the end of these slides. So if there'll be opportunities to be involved in that work through NHRA research, please get in touch. So going back to the where and the why. So these are 2 urban areas within the City of Adelaide. So we worked in Port Adelaide Enfield Council and Salisbury Council. So really want to give thanks to both of those councils who participated and supported the project and were partners in the project. I'd also like to acknowledge that SAFECOM, the South Australian Fire and Emergency Services Commission, funded these 2 pilot projects, and so want to actually acknowledge their contribution to these outcomes. So why these 2 locations? Firstly, there was a high population of people that were born overseas. The main countries that people hailed from are those listed on the screen. And those 2 places also had experience or had significant risk of the following hazards. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So who participated? So we didn't say, well, it's only one culture that can be involved in this project. It was effectively anyone that identified as coming from a multicultural background was invited to participate. And for the 2 projects that we ran, we had participants from Afghanistan, Barbados, China, Côte d'Azur, Mexico, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, Sri Lanka, Tigray, South Sudan, Eritrea, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and Iraq. So it was quite a mix of people from a range of different backgrounds. And the end result is that people worked very, very closely together, shared experience, and really recognised what was similar across their cultures as opposed to what was too different. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about the impact. I want to get all the facts and figures out of the way because ultimately we want to talk about the fun stuff, the stuff that community did to strengthen their own disaster resilience. So apologies that this slide is a little bit cut off, but you can see there in terms of for each project, the number of community leaders that were involved. That was just the people that participated in the workshops. It doesn't talk about the scale of people that were reached. The number of different resilience initiatives that those communities adopted as part of their plan, the numbers are there. In terms of we gauged how many people actually increased knowledge of disaster resilience, and those figures are there, as well as their confidence to cope and their feelings of connectedness. So really thinking about disaster resilience and some of the measures that we use and social connection, as we all understand, is a key part of that. So if we can go to the next slide. One more bit of impact data is coming your way shortly. Thank you. And we really, at the very, very beginning of the project, we actually asked people how much do they even share information in their communities on emergency and disaster resilience. And I think you can see there that the figures speak for themselves, that but before engagement in this project, 49% said yes, and that increased to 96% by the end of the project. So some really good outcomes there. But now if we can go to the next slide. I'll talk a little bit about the workshops. I'm not going to labour the point about what was involved in the workshops, but effectively it was all focused on a strengths-based approach about understanding what community already know and where the gaps in knowledge were. And we tailored one of the exercises around what do people understand about risks and hazards in their home, in their neighbourhood, and in their state. And these are some of the things that people came up with. And through these conversations, there was lots of discussion. And I'll never forget one individual said, well, when I first came to Australia, there was a snake in my house and I didn't know what to do, so I killed the snake. And then he learned that it's not actually legal to kill a snake. So there was, and he said how he stood up on the table and he was hiding from the snake. So we were having lots of conversations that we don't necessarily always have in more mainstream communities. There were conversations about cooking practices and heating practices. There were conversations around water safety, acknowledging that some people came from landlocked countries. The conversations were rich, but what they were able to unlock was really understanding and identifying where gaps in knowledge were, but also the context that people from other places bring into this country. So if we can move on, I just want to, in those workshops, introduce you to these two young boys. When we talk about community leaders and we talk about whole of community, want to acknowledge that children are absolutely part of that. So these two young boys, their role in the workshops that they said they would be comfortable doing was, as all of the adults were talking, they were drawing what they were hearing. And at the end of the workshop, they would hold up their picture so that, and then report back what they had heard from the adults. And it was a beautiful way of bringing children into the work. So if I can move to the next slide, because we're really now going to get into the fun stuff. We are going to go a bit over time, but I think that's okay because it's rich and fun stories. So if we can move on. Okay, so in the city of we're going to go to Port Adelaide. This community identified that there were so many different agencies and groups and organisations that it was confusing in terms of who did what and what hazard they covered, and it was a minefield of information out there. And so they decided to partner with One Culture. One Culture is an organisation that brings people from multicultural communities together to play soccer, as well as other sports. And so we had a sports tournament. Different emergency services came along for the day and stood behind their stalls. Now, in our feedback forms that we got after, some of the strong feedback was, we would like it if people didn't stand behind their stalls, but they actually came out and talked to us. One of the community members indicated that a tug of war would be a great activity to bring all of the different people engaged in that event together. So you can see at the bottom, people from a range of different backgrounds working with surf lifesaving, with SAPOL, and we had some tug of war tournaments. It was hysterical. And that, idea of trust, what better way than putting everyone in the same vulnerable position and being a little bit competitive about it. So it was a wonderful, wonderful day. If we can move on, please. Farah, you talked a lot about information and resources for people from different backgrounds. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because Summer's going to pick it up again. But this, in Port Adelaide, they started this conversation around the fact that there is so much information out there that you have to visit 400 different websites and navigate through them. So instead of waiting for anyone to do something differently, they decided they were going to create their own resource. So this tool is a multi-hazard emergency preparedness information kit. It's translated in Pashto and Dari and a range of other languages. They designed the booklet. They illustrated the booklet. They did the translations in the booklet, and each page and each hazard links back to the agency that is in charge of those particular hazards. And all of the information was checked and done in collaboration with those agencies as well. Yes, there's a question. We will share information about that kit. I'm going to move on. We also community members also identified that swimming classes were something that they hadn't really accessed. And so from the day that we had with the multicultural soccer tournaments, VAC Swim were there. So and members of the Muslim community approached VAC Swim and basically organised free swimming classes for Muslim women to increase their swimming capability. That then moved on to swimming classes for men as well as other activities included preparedness workshops with the Chinese community. So this workshop was a Red Cross pillowcase program. I won't go on too much about that, but that's aimed at young people, preparing them for disaster, as well as our emergency ready program. We brought parents and children together to have those conversations through those different programs. I'm going to leave it there. Over to Summer. Summer's work is fantastic, and she's got the best part of this presentation. Go for it, Summer.
Thanks, Mary. I will start talking about Salisbury Group. Salisbury Resilience Group, and I will start by sharing one of the participants in Ready Communities group or working group that we had. Her name is Seta, and Seta was invited to share her story during the celebration that we had last year for Refugee Week. I'm going to read her story. Her own words now. So I will share my experience as a refugee. I moved to Australia with my husband and 2 kids in 2016. I used to struggle with mental health. I felt constant sadness and physical pain. Despite that, I decided to change my story. I chose to learn. I attended many workshops with Red Cross. Then through Ready Communities project, we started a cooking group. I want to thank Red Cross and Summer who supported and encouraged us to form this group. It has allowed me to meet so many new people and build a wonderful network of women from many different nationalities. Eventually, I began volunteering at our local community center where our cooking group is based. I had earned certificates in many fields, including cooking, makeup artistry, agriculture, and business. I also attended several educational sessions, such as those held by the Red Cross. That is why I advise you, my sisters, keep learning and attending educational workshops. Based on my journey, I tell you to hold into hope because you are strong women capable of achieving whatever you dream of in this life. I wish success and happy life to everyone. This was Sita's story. And Sita, as I mentioned, was one of the participants in Ready Communities project. And as it was mentioned in her story, through Ready Communities, the cooking group was established alongside 20 other actions or initiatives. But in my next slide, I'm going to focus on the cooking group. Next slide, please. So the cooking group was established in, no, the previous ones, sorry. The cooking group was established in 2024, and they meet monthly at Morella, as they did not only offer the space for a welcoming environment where the participant or the women felt included. The center offered coffee and tea for free. They gave them access to everything in the kitchen and freedom to choose what to do every time. They also give the women an opportunity to access a space that they don't normally enter and feel and also feel welcome and included in the community, which eventually allows them to seek learning and inviting guest speakers in their own space to learn and gain knowledge about emergency. So we actually did 7 invited guests from emergency agencies to deliver information sessions about various things, like the Alert SA app, heat waves, and information about home fire safety as well. Next slide, please. So this initiative, which Mary talked about, started with the first Ready Communities group in Port Adelaide Enfield, and it's a community-driven initiative, was supported by Red Cross. The first group developed this multi-hazard guide and translated it to Pashto, Dari, and Chinese. But then when we started working with the Salisbury group, they actually liked the idea and took this foundation and built on it. They translated the information into more 4 languages: Arabic, Dinka, Spanish, and Tigrinya, which brings the total languages to 7 plus English. The booklet also have, as you can see on the screen, have a QR code at the bottom of each page, which takes you directly to more information. Some of them are in language as well, to support the information that I mentioned on the page. Then Salisbury Group has expanded on this work and created a user-friendly application supporting languages. This progression represents that community-led growth where each group's efforts are built on the previous ones to strengthen resilience for all. For people who are new to Australia, understanding and preparing for emergencies such as bushfires, extreme heat event, or extreme weather event, floods, can actually be very challenging because it's completely different. It's different in different climate, different geography, and also different emergency systems. So the app and booklet make critical information accessible, as they provide clear information in multi-language, easy to understand the local emergency system. The app also had access to vital emergency contact numbers, and the resource itself bridges the knowledge gap within multicultural community and makes it easier for new arrival to feel safer and more connected. And when we thought about this initiative by providing both the app and the booklet, which is a digital version and a hard copy version, we were able to cater for different preferences and ensuring that everyone can access critical information in the way that they best suits their needs. The group not only created the booklet and the app, but actually they had a plan on how to talk to community members and allow them to have this information as a resource, because usually we tend to create resources and we don't have a plan on how community members will access them. Therefore, they distributed the booklet in several community events and also encourage community members, if they prefer the digital copy, to download the app during those events. The app link, the booklet, sorry, has a QR code at the back, which takes you directly to the app and allow people to download it. We had a combined dinner at the end of the project in 2024, at the end of the year, to celebrate all the Ready communities that we worked with. And the multicultural group explained or talk about the app and the booklet during that event. And it was very well received from everyone, and to the point that the mainstream community requested to have an English version of the booklet as well, as they said, this is considered to be a one-stop shop and easy to navigate, which we did afterwards, and we printed the booklet in an English version as well. Next slide, please. Another initiative was that we participated in MFS Open Day with a focus on multicultural communities. So we worked with ES agencies to support creating an event to focus on enhancing disaster resilience within multicultural communities. The event was held at Adelaide Fire Station, and some of the people who attended that event reported that this is actually the first time that they visit the fire station. So we established at the entrance a triage point where we meet the community member and greet them on arrival. We had a very large welcoming sign where it featured greetings such as welcome or hello in so many different languages. Community members were greeted in their first language or own language whenever it's possible, supported by our bilingual staff and volunteers. And from there, they were guided through the stalls with a staff and volunteers to assist them to engage with stall managers and access information in their preferred language. This support went beyond language assistant. It also held on it played an important role in building that connection between emergency service agencies and multicultural community, helping create trust and improve access to services as well. Next slide, please. And here, as you can see on the screen, some other initiatives that we have done also through the multicultural cooking group. We did a pillowcase workshop with the kids, where mothers attended an emergency ready workshop at the same time. We did a first aid course for parents. And through the multicultural group, we did a few well-being activities alongside with lots of cooking, which was delicious. Next slide, please. So after Red Cross finished, Morella Community Center continued to support the multicultural group for 12 months in 2025. And actually, up to today, is still the Morella Community Center is still offering the space for free for the women to meet monthly. And the women are quite engaged with the center with other activities and other groups as well. Yes. We also, one of the initiatives was establishing an empowerment group for South Sudanese youth. The group meets regularly, and they had a lot of activities like picnics, and they also invite guest speakers. But the person who started the group was part of the Ready communities, but she handed over the group to another friend, and her friend is continue supporting that group. The app is was secured and supported for 2 years, but it's gonna unfortunately end by the end of this year. And also the booklet was distributed to community leaders, which you could consider it a trusted resource where where they can distribute directly to the community members. That's it for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mary and Summer, for your beautiful presentation. And the time for our webinar has almost come to an end. These discussions is just proof that it needs to happen all through the year, every day. So we unfortunately today we cannot do the Q&A sessions, but there are some questions, and we are happy to send it to our speakers, and if they want to give us some written answer, we will upload it to the event website. So I would like to also thank now Melissa Pepin, Juanita Ball, Simon Dacre, and Angela Draper for their hard work making this webinar possible. I would like to also acknowledge the support from the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, in bringing these important resources to the forefront. Our next AIDR webinar is a Spotlight Series webinar on long-term disaster impacts and education outcomes. Join us on Wednesday, 1st of April from 1 to 2 p.m. Melbourne time. The registration link is on your screen and it's also in the chat. When you leave this call, you will be taken to a short survey. We will use this information to ensure our professional development events continues to meet your needs. It has been my pleasure to host you this afternoon. Until next time, stay well. On behalf of AIDR, thank you for joining us today, and bye-bye.